Hello everyone, welcome back to Too Sweet MTG and welcome to another Cube Tuesdays. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about one of my pet cards in all of Cube. We're going to be talking about Hard Evidence. So, Hard Evidence is a single blue for a sorcery that says, create a 0/3 blue crab creature token and investigate, which means that you create a clue token. A clue token is an artifact which has pay 2 generic, sacrifice this token and draw a card. So, in terms of what does this card do and what is it good for, I really love this card. It's so unassuming, but it just does so many things to so many different decks in Cube. This card is like the glue. It just pieces so many different things together. So firstly, it's a very cheap sorcery. So any Spells Matters decks, things that are running like Young Pyromancer or Monastery Mentor, love cards like this. It's a single blue to trigger all those effects, which is just awesome. Then making an 0/3 body is actually quite relevant. Like, it's such a good card against kind of any kind of aggro matchup because your opponent is kind of tasked with the question, am I going to have to use a real removal spell to deal with this annoying crab? Because if they can't get rid of it, the crab will just block their 1-drop or their 2-drops for days. And that can honestly be the difference between you having enough time to stabilize or not. Then the clue token that Hard Evidence makes is card draw. This is a slow blue cantrip. You don't get the card straight away, but it will just sit there like you're a blue deck. There will be a turn where you have 2 mana. You can crack the clue at instant speed. Maybe you're holding up a counterspell and your opponent hasn't done anything. Then just, there you go, draw a card. But then the fact that the clue token is an artifact is really huge. You can tinker this clue token away to go and get your win condition, or you can just use it to buff up your construct tokens, or it can count towards your Tolarian Academy, making it tap for more mana, or you can use it to ramp you with Urza. There's just so much that having an extra artifact in play does nowadays, and it being a nice little bonus on this card really comes up more than you think. Like, I have generally used the clue token from a Hard Evidence to tinker something away to go and get like a Sundering Titan. Just having more artifacts in general is something that those decks really want. So those are 4 really useful things that this card does, and again, it costs just a single blue mana. Which moves us on to, when should you draft it? So, obviously, this is still not a super high pick. This is not something you're going to be looking to pick early. This is not like pack 1, pick 1, or maybe even in the first like 8 picks, I would say. But that necessarily is not a bad thing. As we've said, this is just there to make your deck better. If you're in any of the decks that we've mentioned, this is a card that you're perfectly happy seeing at the end of a pack. Maybe you've wheeled it. You want to see this in the pack where there's not really much else for you. But then once you've drafted it, it's highly likely going to make your deck. It's just a 1-drop. It asks so little of you to give you so much value from it. In terms of how it plays, it does depend on the deck that you're in. In most decks, just playing it early to make a crab blocker and to set up your card advantage later is just going to be very nice. You'll then crack the clue whenever you have some spare mana or want a bit of card draw. If you're in the artifact deck, then you're probably going to keep the clue around longer. As we mentioned, it synergizes with everything else that that deck is trying to do. But just having more artifacts in play is generally going to be helpful. The Spells Matters deck is the one environment where you're less likely to cast this as early as possible, and that's mainly because you might want to be trying to get like some value out of playing your Young Pyromancer first, then play this after, so you get the crab token as well as the 1/1 elemental from the Young Pyromancer. Then what's nice is that with all those situations, you still have the flexibility of, okay, my opponent's playing aggro, I need to play something to block this Goblin Guide. Here we go, here's crab, life total preserved. In terms of alternatives, there will be other cards out there that are single spells that give you multiple tokens, that kind of thing. But in terms of cards that are actually cubable, the best example that I can see is that effectively this is like the blue Thraben Inspector. It's basically a 1-mana body that gives you some card draw a bit later on. And to be honest, Thraben Inspector is played in Pauper Cube and it's played all the way up to the Mitgo Vintage Cube. Hard Evidence does have the trickier case of getting into like something like the Mitgo Vintage Cube because just blue is traditionally way more high powered. Like, I love Hard Evidence, but I'm not going to compare it to Ancestral Recall or anything like that. But that does bring us on to what kind of power level of cube could this go into. So I run this in my 540 unpowered vintage cube and I really like it. And that kind of leads me to believe that if it's good and playable in my cube, that means it should be good and playable in every cube below that. Like, it is a common, it is 4 cents. If you haven't tried this card and you have any kind of peasant, pauper, modern, budget, legacy style of cube, where you have any kind of Spells Matters or any artifact synergies, or hell, just even a control deck, I'd highly recommend giving Hard Evidence a go. I don't think you will be disappointed. Right, I think we are going to leave it there. If you like these type of Cube videos, please consider subscribing. We do these every Tuesday. I always love talking a little bit of Cube. But anyway, until next time, I will see you all soon. Goodbye.